In November 1870, just 5 years after the end of the Civil War, 4 students walked into a makeshift classroom in a church basement in Washington, D.C., prepared to begin their studies at what would eventually be named the Paul Laurence Dunbar High School, the first black public high school in the United States. In the decades that followed, Dunbar became a shining example of academic excellence to which other black high schools could aspire.
Dunbar High set high standards for their students. This was a school where African Americans learned in all different fields and moved beyond industrial education.
At the turn of the century, a number of secondary schools across the country were in the process of transforming from exclusive private institutions into public ones. Yet the overwhelming majority of local and state governments in the South refused to allow black students to attend integrated schools.
Very few African Americans had a chance to go to high school, particularly during the height of the Jim Crow era, but they are keenly invested in education and in creating opportunities where the state has failed them.
Overcoming obstacles at every juncture, black institutions strived for excellence under the leadership of brilliant and highly motivated teachers, many of whom had advanced college degrees, some from Ivy League universities.
Teachers wanted to give young people access to a classical education. There were times when they would secretly provide more sophisticated forms of education.
These high schools are not only training the leadership class of the African American community, but they're training them in such a way that they have a real commitment to the community that they are a part of.
In 1954, Brown v. Board of Education ruled that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. This case, argued in part by a legal team made up of Dunbar alumni, was a huge victory, but its implementation was quite uneven and also had unintended consequences.
The process of integration did break down some things that were real resources in the black community. You lose a lot of black administrators, a lot of black teachers who were important in these schools. You create schooling environments where black children, quite frankly, aren't as valued and expectations for them aren't as high as they had been.
Nonetheless, black public high schools managed to create leaders in nearly every field, even though Jim Crow segregation was both pervasive and pernicious. Since the late 1950s, black basketball players have taken the NBA to new heights. But it's surprising to learn that after basketball was invented in 1891, the first black teams were paramount in shaping the game we know and love today.
In 1904, basketball was first introduced to African Americans on a wide-scale organized basis.
There's a sort of philosophy of basketball as one of these activities that we could use to keep young men from going on a wayward path.
All these early advertisements for basketball games in the black community always said basketball and dance. They would have live orchestras during games.
It was this idea of basketball and music all being part of one night of entertainment.
People are coming to these games, 1,000, 2,000 spectators. This could be a lucrative business, and that's where Bob Douglas came in. Douglas was an organizer. He founded the New York Renaissance, the first all-black, black-owned professional basketball team.
Most aspects of American social life was very segregated. Black talent was not given a big showcase. So there was a kind of showmanship that they had to use in order to entertain.
The Wrens would go to these all-white towns and they would beat the local all-white team. People would come from miles around. It was a big deal. In 1939, a Chicago newspaper said, let's have an official tournament. So they invited the 12 best professional teams, including the New York Wrens. The Wrens were locked in a rivalry predating the tournament with the Oshkosh All-Stars, which was an all-white team out of Wisconsin. This 1939 matchup was going to really determine once and for all who was the best. Thousands came to the game. They knew it was going to be a tough fight, but on the strength of shooting, moving the ball, and just overall firepower, the Wrens got the victory. They were world's champions, not colored world's champions. And it was a tremendous win, not only for the Renaissance and Bob Douglas, but also for the Black community. And by innovating in ways that affected the game itself, Black players popularized basketball at a time when it wasn't yet America's game.
Basketball became a cultural expression, the game where you could express your creativity. There's a legacy of Dr. J to Magic Johnson to Michael Jordan. It's not enough to win the game. You want to win the game to start.
Curry from hand,